A special 1-hour America Tonight. War in the Gulf. Baghdad orders its troops out of Kuwait. The White House says the war won't stop. Dawn reveals the devastation to an army barracks in Saudi Arabia. The American death toll climbs. And Bob McEwen reports from the front lines, deep inside Kuwait. From CBS News, this is America Tonight, with Dan Rather in Saudi Arabia, Charles Kuralt in New York, and Leslie Stahl in Washington.
Good evening. President Bush went into a hurry-up meeting with his war advisors tonight. The UN Security Council called a late-night meeting, all because this broadcast was heard on Baghdad radio.
Orders have been issued to our armed forces to withdraw in an organized fashion to its position which they held before the 1st of August, 1990.
Iraqi troops, the broadcast said, have fought an epic, valiant battle and now have been ordered to leave Kuwait to fight their way out if necessary. The White House quickly said tonight that leaving Kuwait cannot be done that way.
The statement out of Baghdad today says that Saddam Hussein's forces will fight their way out while retreating. We will not attack unarmed soldiers in retreat, but we will consider retreating combat units as a movement of war.
Marlon Fitzwater said if Saddam Hussein wants to leave Kuwait now, he's going to have to personally and publicly and unconditionally announce it himself. 27 American troops, at least, were killed today when a Scud missile finally found its mark behind the lines in Saudi Arabia. Those 27, Fitzwater said, offer testimony as to how far Saddam Hussein can be trusted.
Marlon Fitzwater gave his briefing tonight in the White House briefing room, and our correspondent there, Wyatt Andrews, was there to ask questions. Wyatt, it sounds as if the White House not only rejected this withdrawal offer, but actually appear to have added some new conditions.
Leslie, exactly right. The president is now demanding that Saddam Hussein personally get on Baghdad radio and not only agree to withdraw from Kuwait, but also renounce his claim there and agree to all the UN resolutions, including the one that calls for him to pay money, war reparations to Kuwait. Leslie, secondly, and perhaps far more important to the safety of our troops, the president is now dictating exactly how he wants the Iraqis to surrender. He's saying now they cannot leave the field of battle with their weapons, that their only hope is to leave unarmed and head straight north. In that case, he said tonight, they are safe. Other than that, they face attack by the Allies. Leslie?
Thank you, Wyatt. Marlon Fitzwater also seemed to suggest that the White House didn't believe Saddam Hussein, suggested it might be a trick, this withdrawal ploy. Let's go to the Pentagon, David Martin. David, why do you think the White House is so suspicious?
Well, let's face it, an impressive record on making good on his word, but beyond that, there was real concern here today that what the Iraqi army was preparing to do was not withdraw, but actually resort to chemical weapons. In fact, when these movements were first spotted that triggered these reports that the Iraqi army might be withdrawing, the initial analysis here at the Pentagon was that all that was happening was that they were repositioning themselves in preparation for using chemical weapons. And when you think about it, one of the first things an army would do if it were going to use chemical weapons would be to pull its own troops back so they wouldn't be contaminated. So there was a real belief here that not only was this a trick, it was a monstrous trick.
Thank you, David. The reports of wounded are going up in Saudi Arabia, where that Scud attack hit the barracks. The number of killed are now 27. Let's go to Saudi Arabia and Dan Rather, who's there. Dan?
Thank you, Leslie. As talk of a possible withdrawal by Saddam Hussein fills the air in Washington and the United Nations, the war appears to be entering its decisive hours on the battlefront. In southern Iraq, elements of the U.S. Army's 18th Corps, including the 82nd Airborne, are reported dashing to the Euphrates River. The idea is to cut off the Republican Guard and then to cut it up. Supporting the advance, the 18th Artillery, one of the keys to collapsing Iraqi resolve. It was shoot and scoot as the artillery constantly was on the move, slowed only by a mass of surrendering Iraqis and the need to bury Iraqi dead. Now, the artillery is covering the left flank of the U.S. Army 7th Corps. That's the main force in the southern Iraq desert, a main force of almost 50,000 Americans that may, as we speak, be in the early stages of engaging some of the outer remnants of the Republican Guard. Now, on the other side of the front, right up against the Persian Gulf, on the Gulf Road leading to Kuwait City, U.S. Marines are engaged and have been engaged for quite a while in a furious fight against an Iraqi armored division. Following close behind those advancing Marines is CBS News reporter Bob McEwen. Just a short time ago, we asked McEwen about Allied artillery opening up again.
Yeah, about 2 minutes ago, the Allied artillery over to the west, not very far from us, a few hundred yards, several hundred yards perhaps, started to fire. It's the first outgoing artillery we've had since about 8 o'clock last night. The last time we received an Iraqi shell in was about 6, just at dusk. So it was relatively quiet overnight. There was the usual rumble of bombardment off in the distance of Iraqi positions. There was tracer fire. As I told you last evening, there were a lot of flares lighting up the horizon. There was some tank activity firing towards the east. There's a community along the Gulf Coast here, and it's thought that there is some Iraqi resistance in there. We saw tanks firing at them last night.
And we hear the pop of artillery behind you. These are American units or part of the Pan-Arab Force?
No, this is part of the Pan-Arab Force. We're surrounded here essentially by mostly Saudis, some Omanis, some Kuwaitis, and the Kuwaitis actually, interestingly enough, have hired some Sudanese soldiers to come up here with them. There is a corps of U.S. Marines here as well, special forces people to direct operations.
Bob, what's the situation on the burning oil wells? At last report, about half of Kuwait's total number of oil wells were aflame. Can you still see that great drapery of smoke over the area?
Yeah, to the north and east here, down by the Gulf Coast, which is one of the main Kuwaiti oil areas, there are at least 3 oil wells burning. 2 of them have been burning for a couple of days now. One just sprang up, or at least we saw the flames for the first time last night. We have no way of knowing whether Iraqis set it on fire or whether there was a firefight there. We know Kuwaiti tanks were in the area, and so we have no way of knowing exactly the circumstances. But behind me last night, there was an eerie orange glow through the entire northern sky. We could pick out at least 12 spots of light, intense spots of light, oil wells, we presume, on fire. And the people encamped here overnight as they head down the highway towards Kuwait City could certainly be excused for wondering what exactly lies ahead, especially the Kuwaitis who remember home the way it used to be.
You've described previously going warily and gingerly because of fear of minefields. Have all the mines been cleared out now?
We don't know about that. People still proceed very warily here. There were helicopters in the area clearing the minefields immediately around us yesterday, Kuwaiti helicopters. Back towards the rear, the job fell to Saudi foot soldiers who were wandering around looking for the little white plugs like a bathtub drain that mark the top of a mine. They seem to have some success at it, and frankly, to my confusion, they seem to enjoy themselves. One reason we are especially wary here, though, is that because the thrust has come up the highway, it has bypassed, we understand, certain, or it may have bypassed certain pockets of Iraqi resistance. There's habitation along the Gulf Coast here, and we put ourselves in the rather sensitive position of going over there yesterday thinking it was abandoned. We were shooting back at the action. Our backs turned to the town over there, and suddenly we heard some popping and some machine gun fire, and our cameraman, David Green, who is a man well experienced in this sort of thing, said, "That's sniper fire, and they're firing at us." And we hopped in the cars and got out of there as quickly as possible.
Do you still hear the troops talking about the danger of chemical attack?
As a matter of fact, we do. Some Marines came to visit us last night, and they told us that further to the west, they have reports that in the breaching operations on the first day of the invasion, a chemical mine was encountered. They didn't have any information on injuries resulting from it. They are all wearing, as we are, chemical suits, and gas masks are never far away. It's certainly something that is on everyone's mind here.
Bob, thanks a lot. Stay safe.
Dan, my pleasure.
27 Americans killed, 98 injured, all service personnel, most if not all believed members of a reserve outfit. Some of the casualties may include women. All as a result of a Scud attack here inside the eastern part of Saudi Arabia earlier in the day. The first newsman to reach the scene was CBS news correspondent and CBS This Morning anchor Harry Smith. Harry?
Dan, we've got some new pictures we want to show you right now that we just took a little less than an hour ago of the devastating scene there this morning. Give you a clearer picture of what exactly transpired. You can see how much damage the Scud caused to the huge warehouse, how the American troops were trapped inside. Aluminum and steel girders hanging from the frames. But this morning there is little evidence of the fire that spread and the chaos and tragedy that was everywhere just a few hours ago. This is the first time, Dan, that an American target was hit by a Scud. And the Scud hit on a day when news about the ground war was, of course, very good. And when people started talking about the problems of the day and how well the ground war was going, they were talking about a day when maybe in the not too distant future the war might end, a day when some people started thinking about going home.
One of these ambulances has to go up there. Oh, the people are up here.
Scuds aren't supposed to hit in Saudi Arabia. The Patriots always knock them out. That's the conventional wisdom. Nothing could have been farther from the truth.
I had my mask on. They called all clear. It wasn't a chemical. It was just high explosive. As you can see, it's total. The whole thing's gone. Everybody in it is either wounded or dead.
How many people were inside?
About 130 maybe. There's 53 for sure. That was my unit. They're gone.
The military says the Scud had broken up in the air, but most of the missile landed on a warehouse converted into quarters for U.S. Army troops. There was little warning time, perhaps 2 minutes.
I knew right away that this was a direct Scud hit, just judging by the way that it shook the ground and by the enormously loud explosion.
20 minutes after the attack, the scene was pure chaos. A single alley, the only way into the compound, was clogged with ambulances. The lucky wounded were lifted out by medevac choppers. Far from the front lines, the illusion of safety was shattered by a deliberate and despicable act of terrorism.
I think people were just taking it for granted that they weren't going to get harmed, that one of these Scuds was going to get through and actually make contact. And today, unfortunately, it did.
Dan, the thing that has stuck with me since being there last night and seeing the chaos and seeing those wounded soldiers and dead soldiers, the image that stays in your mind is that Marines in Beirut and the terrorist attack that took so many down. And if you think about it, a Scud is nothing really more than a car bomb that flies.
Harry Smith, thanks. It's early in the morning here in Saudi Arabia, day 3 of the massive Allied operation to retake Kuwait. Eric Ingberg brings us up to date.
There are 2 overall impressions that are left by the American and Allied military operation to liberate Kuwait. The first is speed. Everywhere one looks, the U.S. forces are fighting the way their country runs, on gasoline. It will be remembered as the war where there were no foot soldiers, everyone rode. The armored columns that were sent across the border of Iraq when the offensive began are reporting little enemy resistance. And they're eating up the desert so fast that they will soon sever, if they haven't already, the part of Iraq that runs the country from the part of Iraq where the army is located. One American division that's built for speed is the 101st Airborne. It is designed for helicopter assaults. Members of the division have been doing just that in the early hours of the offensive. They have even set up a gas station in the desert with its tanks made of huge rubber bladders to refill their helicopters for the next step. Iraq fought a war against Iran for 8 years, but it never faced anything like this. That may be one reason why so many of the Iraqis are waving white flags. Another reason we're just beginning to find out is that in some cases, the officers who are supposed to be leading Iraqi troops are abandoning them.
The POWs, when we initially interrogated them, said that when the airstrikes hit these positions last night, their officers left and went north. That suggests that they got a big-time morale problem. Their leadership's leaving the soldiers.
Still struggling to understand men who won't fight for their country, at least not much. The American soldiers say that the Iraqis seem to be just tired of fighting. And they're also beaten up from the unrelenting bombings. The latest published estimate is that 18 to 20,000 of the Iraqis have surrendered. So many, the Allies are having trouble handling the rush. The American commanders are adding buses to their convoys to accommodate the numbers. They would rather worry about such logistical complications of surrender than worry about Iraqis shooting at them. Dan, the American commanders are under no illusions that all Iraqis are going to surrender and that it is going to be a battle where it's just the enemy army giving up. As one Marine commander said the other day, we haven't had to fight the varsity yet.
Eric, and the race is on to encircle the Republican Guard. The situation here, Charles, is reminiscent in many ways of the final stages of the 1973 Arab-Israeli War. You recall Israeli forces then rushed across the Suez Canal to complete the encirclement of the Egyptian Third Army before international pressure forced a ceasefire. Charles?
Dan Rather, thanks. The White House gave leaders of Congress the latest word on the war today, and we'll hear from one of those in the meeting when we come back. And after the war is over, if Saddam Hussein isn't still in charge in Iraq, who will be?
Do you know what open-end mutual funds are?
The Wall Street Journal Guide to Understanding Money and Markets tells you in clear, simple English.
Do you know how to spot trends in stocks?
And what stock options are?
And zero coupon bonds?
And the difference between Treasury bills and Treasury notes?
Everything you want to know about the sometimes baffling world of money and investing is in this remarkable 120-page book. And now it's yours free when you subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. Call now and you can have 13 weeks of the Wall Street Journal and this valuable 120-page Guide to Understanding Money and Markets. That's 13 weeks of the journal for the news and ideas you need every business day. And this guide free, which tells you everything you want to know about money and markets, all for only $37, a 24% savings off the newsstand price.
Call now, toll-free, 800-247-7800. That's 800-247-7800 for today's Wall Street Journal.
To get rid of her gray, my wife can spend 40 minutes. But I discovered the 5-minute hair coloring.
The revolutionary discovery called Just for Men from the leader in men's hair coloring. Simply apply Just for Men and in 5 minutes shampoo out.
Gray is blended away. The look of my natural color is back in 5 minutes. That was me, and it won't fade or wash out.
My hair takes forever, but you look great in just 5 minutes.
The look of your natural color in just 5 minutes with Just for Men.
Hard to believe, but that was me, Dan Deerdorf, before I lost 40 pounds in 4 months with Ultra Slim Fast. Hey, I'm a big eater, but with Ultra Slim Fast, I never felt hungry. The plan is easy. I had a delicious shake for breakfast, another for lunch, and then a sensible dinner. I'm back to my college playing weight, and I feel terrific. Best of all, I'm not shaped like one of these anymore.
Ultra Slim Fast. Give us a week. We'll take off the weight.
A toddler falls 3 stories into a Russian river.
I thought between the fall and drowning that he was gone.
Witness a miracle on Rescue 911 Tuesday.
Wednesday, a young mother in danger
I saw a man get shot.
puts Jake and McCabe on their toughest assignment ever.
Do you have duty diapers?
On Jake and the Fat Man.
Yes.
Then, trapped in a real-life nightmare of multiple personalities, there's only one way out. A special 48 hours after Jake and the Fat Man.
Defense Secretary Cheney and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Colin Powell held a special briefing on the war today for the leaders of Congress. In attendance was Alan Simpson, the Senate Minority Whip. Welcome.
How are you?
Let's, if we can, talk about this withdrawal plan tonight and the White House rejection of it. The White House seems to be setting up all kinds of conditions now for the Iraqi withdrawal. They have to accept all the UN resolutions, including an agreement for Iraq to pay reparations. Isn't the White House setting up a situation Saddam Hussein can never accept? And aren't they saying we have to pursue this war to the very end?
I don't think that's the case. I think that what has to be impressed upon the American people is that we really are at war. And when you are at war and you have opened something as significant as D-Day on June 6, 1994, and suddenly G-Day, Ground Day here, that you pursue that with all the effort, vigor, and energy you can. And you do not stop, especially while this guy is giving some signals that he wishes to do that. That's absurd and impossible.
Do you think that he is making this offer because he's ready to surrender, he's defeated, or is it a trick, which I think Marlin Fitzwater tried to suggest?
Well, I wouldn't. I'd be more indelicate. Out in the Wild West, you know, we don't worry people to death. We used to hang them. This guy lies. This man lies. His people have lied to the world, and he could well be lying again. And so we must not allow him to come out with his armor or his armored personnel carriers or his artillery and his tows and just drag that stuff. We just say, if you really want to quit, then get the flag up and start marching out on foot and leave all the stuff there. That's the way you do it.
If he starts retreating with his tanks and with his armor, but nevertheless retreating, can we really mow them down? I mean, that's almost like shooting someone in the back, isn't it?
That's absurd. We're not going to mow anybody down that's coming out with a white flag.
No, within their tanks. Let's say they're in their vehicles and they're...
If these people are going to come out with their vehicles and turn their turrets, they did that once to us. We listened to that one for a little while, and then they just turned the turrets around. They could easily be regrouping, as your correspondent is saying, to do chemical warfare, to regroup, to reposition. They know what's coming, but they're just finding it out. I don't know how much communication they have, but the neck is about to be cut off the chicken.
You wouldn't be concerned that the world public opinion could turn on us if they are genuinely retreating in their tanks?
Well, everybody in the world is going to know whether they're genuinely retreating or not. If you're genuinely retreating, you're coming out of there with your flag up and you're moving and you're in humiliation and you're leaving. And we're not there to humiliate them, but we're there as a military purpose to see that they leave. And you can't say, come on through with your Russian tanks and your missile systems and the whole works and move to the rear. That's impossible.
You know, what they are saying is that they'll leave Kuwait, but we have forces in Iraq. Now, if they leave Kuwait in any fashion, do our troops stay in Iraq, pinning down the Republican Guard? Do we remain there? How do we get out? Will we be an occupying force in southern Iraq to prevent Saddam Hussein from getting his Republican Guard up protecting him in Baghdad?
Well, there is a Kuwaiti theater of operation, and just because the Republican Guard happen to be hanging over the border of Iraq, it's not going to make any difference to us in this movement that we're going to pursue. But we're not going to Baghdad. There's no military presence there.
But we'll stay in southern Iraq, is what you're saying.
Well, we have to stay where the enemy troops are. We are in a full-gauge, full-bore operation.
As an occupying force if they withdraw?
Well, if they withdraw, then, then we begin to withdraw too. After the withdrawal has been made and the equipment has been left there, then the Allied forces begin to remove themselves from the area and set up the UN conditions and the UN presence and bring the other governments back in and begin the transition.
Senator Simpson, thank you very much
for
being our guest.
Thank you.
Charles?
Leslie, we will have a graphic look at just how far Allied forces have advanced in the first 48 hours of this war when America Tonight continues.
When it's late and your productivity is falling off, you can splash a little water on your face, or better yet, revive with Vivarin. Government-appointed experts say it's safe and works, and all you need is one glass of water. So revive with Vivarin.
It's not easy to pull yourself away from a bowl of Kellogg's Raisin Bran. Those 2 scoops of raisins taste so good, you'll find that once you start, you can't leave them behind. It's those 2 scoops that taste too good to pull yourself away. 2 scoops of raisins, golden flakes of bran. Get every bite you can. It's those 2 scoops that taste too good to pull yourself away. 2 scoops that taste too good in Kellogg's Raisin Bran. 2 scoops.
This motel doesn't have 8-inch masonry walls like Red Roof Inn. Still, you meet some interesting people. You were saying?
Well, I grew up in Akron,
Of course you did.
but when I was 12, we moved to Findlay, where my...
Next time, hit the roof. Red Roof Inns. Call 1-800-THE-ROOF.
The ground war grinds on as the Allies press the battle to free Kuwait.
We are continuing to attack and continue to achieve tremendous success against the Iraqi forces.
Stay with CBS News for the latest developments as Dan Rather reports from Saudi Arabia. Tomorrow on the CBS Evening News.
Last night, America watched a powerful bestseller become a television event. Don't miss the startling conclusion, and the sea will tell tomorrow night.
America Tonight will continue.
It's simple. With low prices nobody can beat, Winn-Dixie saves you more than any other grocery store. Take Publix, for instance. On February 8th, the same health and beauty items were purchased at both supermarkets. The result, Publix 2010, Winn-Dixie 1719. Winn-Dixie is $2.91 lower than Publix. That's over 14% lower. So it's simple to see where you should shop. Winn-Dixie, with low prices nobody can beat. Nobody.
The story, Israel under attack. Missiles crash into Tel Aviv.
This is where the missile reportedly hit.
Giselle Fernandez brings home the story. Families face the fear of chemical attack. Giselle Fernandez brings home the story.
There was at least 1 death.
Since war began, she's the first South Florida anchor to go to Israel. Seek out the local story, the personal story, the human story, and bring it home to you. Giselle Fernandez, Channel 6 Action News. We're earning our reputation, one story at a time.
Somebody said, what would you do?
When you've been reporting the news long enough to have earned a reputation, people want to know what you're like in person. So you try to answer the question. You try to hear the concerns. And most of all, you try to avoid the desserts.
Sure you don't want any pie?
No, thanks.
Channel 6 anchor John Hembrick brings a lot of experience to our news. He also brings a lot of friends. At Channel 6 Action News, we're earning our reputation, one story at a time. When you're earning a reputation for stories about children and the issues that affect them, you get involved. You get emotional. And once in a while, you even get a hug. Channel 6 anchor Barbara Sloan doesn't just talk about kids. She talks with them.
Different, isn't it? I mean, everybody wants to be included.
At Channel 6 Action News, we're earning our reputation, one story at a time.
As we've been saying, there are intimations tonight that Saddam Hussein would still like to escape from Kuwait with the bulk of his army, if he can. That might be easier said than done now for reasons we can show you on the map with the help of General George Christ and General Michael Dugan. General Christ, show us where the Allied forces are right now.
Charles, things have slowed down a bit since the spectacular advances of yesterday. The Marines are now in pretty stiff resistance as they poke into the lines of the Iraqi reserve. The Arabs on the coast are also running into resistance. As a matter of fact, the Marines had to offload about half of the amphibious force to help this thing out over here. The center is also going rather slowly. These are against heavy lines, and I presume to conserve lives. On the other hand, the 7th Corps with its armored divisions is now slashing around the flank, approaching the Republican Guard. While further up on the Euphrates River, the French, the 101st and the 82nd are putting in a big blocking position up here.
It looks like a very hard situation from which to escape if you're an Iraqi soldier.
Well, I reckon the only place to go, Charles, is here. And once you're here, that becomes a big bullseye, and there's no way out.
And in spite of the serious work being done by infantrymen and artillerymen, the pilots are still in this war in a big way.
Charles, the infantrymen and artillerymen are carrying the bulk of the battle today, along with the armor and cavalry types. But in fact, we perform a great deal of close air support from all the services. Apache helicopters, AV-8s from the Army, A-10s from the Air Force, F-16s, as we see in the graphic here, with both cannon fire and general-purpose bombs. The A-10 carries a 30-millimeter cannon, which is very effective against armor, and Iraqi armor will be cut in half with those.
If I saw all that going on close to me, and I were an American soldier, I'd be worried that one of those pilots might make a slight mistake.
Well, we do lots of things to avoid mistakes, Charles. There's always the potential for that, but A, we train hard. B, we use various kinds of techniques to communicate where the friendlies are. You may have seen earlier in the day colored panels on various vehicles. Radio communications are used. Communications between helicopters that keep very close track of what's going on the ground, and the fighter pilots dropping bombs in the air.
And those are more deadly helicopters than we saw in Vietnam, aren't they?
Those are modern helicopters. Here's one that's not a modern airplane. There's a B-52. If, in fact, one finds a great concentration of Iraqi forces, just as we did in Southeast Asia, B-52s with some 50 500-pound or 750-pound bombs will again come to the aid of American fighting men on the ground and provide very effective close air support.
Well, if Iraq does have reason for wanting to get out of the war at this late date, you have just seen some of the reasons. What will the shape of Iraq be after this war? That's our next subject when America Tonight continues.
Rough, tight, dry skin? That stops with Curel. When you apply Curel regularly, you'll feel its fast-absorbing rehydration formula take over. First, it seals in the healing moisturizers. Then the soothing Curel therapy rehydrates your dry skin. First it seals, then it heals. There's a clear line between other moisturizing formulas and Curel's rehydration formula. Curel for dry skin. First it seals, then it heals.
That was me, Tommy Lasorda, before I lost 30 pounds in 3 months on the Ultra Slim Fast plan. Now it's even easier to have my shake because Ultra Slim Fast comes ready to drink in new cans. Losing weight has never been so convenient. Wherever I am, I can have my shake. Ah, icy cold and delicious. Who says you can't take it with you?
Ultra Slim Fast. Give us a week. We'll take off the weight.
Blasted 10 years into the future, is the Flash ready for the ultimate showdown?
He lost his power.
At a special day and time, Wednesday.
America Tonight will continue.
The story, Israel under attack. Missiles crash into Tel Aviv.
This is where the missile reportedly hit.
Giselle Fernandez brings home the story. Families face the fear of chemical attack. Giselle Fernandez brings home the story.
There was at least one death.
Since war began, she's the first South Florida anchor to go to Israel, seek out the local story, the personal story, the human story, and bring it home.
This one-hour special edition of America Tonight continues. Here again is Charles Kuralt.
Kuwait has just celebrated its National Day, the 30th anniversary of Kuwait's liberation from the British. And Kuwaiti exiles in Bahrain gathered to celebrate. In their homeland, British troops, of course, are among those fighting tonight to liberate them again. Kuwaiti officials sent out the word to Kuwait government employees all over the world to get ready to come home and go back to work.
One of the unstated goals of the war has been driving Saddam Hussein out of power, whether by a direct hit, insurrection by his own people, or a military coup. Joining us, Rashid Haladi, professor of Middle East history at the University of Chicago, and Jeffrey Kemp, former member of the Reagan National Security Council. Many people assume that when this is all over, Saddam Hussein will be out of power by one means or another. Do either of you gentlemen think that he can possibly survive? Professor Haladi?
I think it's unlikely, Leslie, but I think there is a small chance. I think, paradoxically, the harder the United States pushes, the more clear it is that the United States is making this a war aim, the more chance that Saddam Hussein and his regime have of clinging to power. But on balance, I don't think that that chance is very great.
I think he'll be out by the 4th of July, if we're talking about celebration days, Leslie.
Okay. If Saddam Hussein is overthrown, who will take over? There are people who say that if it's anybody in his own inner circle, that's unacceptable. Who's left, Professor?
Well, this is not just a one-man regime. This is a very powerful, very deeply rooted regime. There's a party and there's an army. And I have a feeling that it's going to take a lot of pounding to get that party out of power.
The Ba'athist Party.
The Ba'ath Party, precisely. And it is a party that has controlled the army very tightly. Now, the result of this war may, one way or another, affect that. If Iraqis feel that their country is threatened, that the heart of their country is threatened, they may rally around that army and around that party. Otherwise, there is a possibility of the whole state structure collapsing, in which case you would have various opposition factions that might have a chance of seizing power.
And the army and the Ba'athist Party are aligned. They wouldn't separate in this case, and the military be a separate force?
That is a possibility. In the past, Iraq has suffered from enormous instability, with the army taking power, sometimes simply generals seizing power for themselves. The past 15 or 20 years, though, have seen very strict party control over the army. And I think one of the reasons the United States supported Iraq for so many years is that this regime brought a certain kind of brutal but clear stability to Iraq. The thing that I always wonder about is, if the regime is overthrown, are we going to look back on the days of the Ba'ath Party with all of its evils as the good old days? Because the parties in opposition are not necessarily very friendly to the United States.
Jeffrey Kemp, the White House has been putting out the signal that if the Ba'athist Party or this current regime remains in power, they'll have to pay reparations. The embargo will stay in effect. Do you see anybody else conceivably who could take over?
Well, I think in the short run, there are going to be army officers who would like to string Saddam up by his neck, along, I think, with the Iraqi Air Force, whose contribution to this war has not been stunning. But the problem is that Iraq's going to face enormous structural and human problems when the fighting stops. And someone is going to have to help put the country back together. And what I think we need to be talking about is that we're the ones that's going to have an army stretching probably to the Euphrates. With the equipment and the know-how and the capability, it could well be, in an ironic sense, that it's the United States Army who has to help put Iraq back together just to get it functioning before there can even be another government.
See, I keep asking people about whether our army is going to have to stay there, and you're the first person who seems to be suggesting that that's going to be a serious possibility.
Well, I think we're going to have forces in Iraq until there's a government in Baghdad we can deal with on all
occupying.
Well, not occupying, but sort of occupying territory. And there's going to be an American army in Kuwait for a long time to put it back together.
Professor, yeah.
I'll say it for you, Leslie. Occupying. It will be an occupying army. It will be regarded as an occupying army. And it will be a problem because what we have done to Iraq, we've kept out of our minds and to a very large extent off our TV screens. The Iraqis are going to perhaps blame their government, and they may take out some of their rage on their government, but they will mainly blame the United States. And the United States, I think, will be keeping troops in southern Iraq and maybe other parts of Iraq.
Jeffrey Kemp, will the American people put up with us keeping troops over there for an extended period of time?
No, of course not. And that's where I think our Arab allies are going to have to play an important role. But the fact of the matter is...
And will the American people go along with paying any money to repair Iraq at this point?
No, I think what we will do is contribute to humanitarian assistance. If there are people starving and children dying, we'll be wonderfully generous. We always are when wars end. And that's what you're going to see. And you're going to see congressmen going over to Kuwait wanting to redesign the democracy, a new democracy in our image. I think all the post-war problems are going to be much more tougher to deal with than this military exercise, which is brilliant and successful and is going to be a resounding triumph.
Gentlemen, we'll have to have you back to do part 2 on the future of Iraq and Kuwait. Thank you both very much, Jeffrey Kemp and Professor Holliday. Charles?
We are sorry to have to tell you that John Daly has died. He covered World War II and the White House for CBS News. Then in the 1950s, he became famous as host of What's My Line? And in the 60s, he was director of The Voice of America. John Daly was 77.
In just a few brief hours of playtime, a young body can use up lots of vitamin C. magnesium, vitamin B6, and valuable potassium. All of which, as nature would have it, can be replaced by eating one Chiquita banana. It's the ideal way to nourish an imagination. Chiquita, quite possibly the world's perfect food.
Now, learn to read with Hooked on Phonics. Because Hooked on Phonics is set to music, the right and left brain work together with dramatic reading results. After learning one 18-minute lesson, it's possible to read book one, over 120 pages. So for the beginner or anyone needing reading help, get Hooked on Phonics and learn to read. Call 1-800-ABCDEFG, 1-800-ABCDEFG.
America Tonight will continue.
$0.95 a minute, $2 first minute. 1-900-HOT-ONES.
When you anchor the news at Channel 6, you don't just sit behind a desk. You get to the scene. You get to the source. And when you do it right, you get to the heart of the story. For Giselle Fernandez, news isn't just something you report. It's something you feel.
Getting the facts is important, but the real job is finding the truth.
At Channel 6 Action News, we're earning our reputation, one story at a time.
The American people support this war in overwhelming numbers, according to a CBS News New York Times poll out tonight. And reading between the lines, the public would support the president if he pressed on despite Saddam Hussein's offer to withdraw. When asked if the U.S. should continue fighting till Saddam Hussein is removed from power, a solid majority, 58%, said yes. 75% of our sample said President Bush was right to start the ground war. More than half believe the war is worth the ultimate price, the loss of several thousand American lives. There is also extraordinary support for George Bush. 87% approve of the job he's doing as president. The last commander-in-chief to rate that high was Harry Truman after VE Day and the end of World War II.
Blessed are the peacemakers, the Bible says, but peacemakers do not finish high in the polls when there's a war on. One United States senator, however, still speaks out against the war. It is an old American tradition. Everybody sang "The Yanks Are Coming" as American troops marched off to World War I. Crowds cheered. In the Senate, one man did not cheer. Robert M. La Follette of Wisconsin voted against the declaration of war. He was censured by his state legislature. 320,000 American casualties later, people remembered La Follette's prediction that the war would be a meat grinder. Why is this war to be fought? La Follette asked before it started. After it was over, nobody had a good answer. When the shooting started in Vietnam, the Senate voted yes, except for two lonely members. Old Ernest Greening of Alaska voted no.
Why should we sacrifice the lives of American young men for people who themselves do not want to fight?
Greening was mocked and satirized. His patriotism was called into question.
I think that killing American boys in South Vietnam constitutes an unconstitutional act on the part of the United States government. It's a shocking thing that we, by compulsion, are sending boys to their death in South Vietnam.
And Senator Wayne Morse of Oregon, Greening's only ally in the Senate, was branded a coward and a fool. Years later, when Vietnam was judged an American calamity, the voices of two lonely senators were recalled.
Well, I left the briefing more convinced than ever that the State Department's program in South Vietnam is completely bankrupt.
In the days just before the Persian Gulf War started, a lonely voice was heard again in the Senate of the United States.
Maybe it'll be over in a matter of hours, or a matter of days, or a matter of weeks at the outside, even if it is. At what cost? At what cost in human lives?
It was the voice of Senator Mark Hatfield, Republican of Oregon.
How many lives can we accept? 100? 1,000? 10,000? And who decides? Who decides how many lives lost a family can accept? Who is prepared to tell a grieving widow that her husband's life was part of the loss we deemed acceptable?
USA all the way! USA all the way!
Since then, the country has been swept away by a wave of war enthusiasm not seen in nearly 50 years. The opinion of Senator Hatfield that the war is wrong has been drowned by voices proclaiming it right. Not many people listened to him that day on the Senate floor, and not many people are listening to him now.
We must be able to look at our young men and women now on the front lines and tell them that their lives are a legitimate price to pay. Mr. President, I'm not prepared to do that. I'm not prepared to do that now, and I will not be prepared to do that in the future. 6 months, no, not 6 months from now. 12 months, no, not 12 months from now. Never, never.
That was last month. Now that the war is on, Senator Hatfield wants it to succeed, of course. He just thinks it never should have started. I talked with him just this afternoon. Senator Hatfield, before this war started, you said on the floor of the Senate, this is not a war our country should fight, not for oil, not for pride, not for anything else. Do you still feel that way?
Yes. I think the cost is too high. I think the cost of fighting any war is always too high. Not only the loss of human life, but the costs surrounding the use of ammunition and equipment. We're spending about $1 billion a day, and I think that there were signs that we could have read to avoid this as we could avoid most wars.
Well, what is it about the war exactly that you object to, Senator?
I think that whenever you use war as an instrument of foreign policy, it's a sign of failure. I think that we could have seen that the unresolved Palestinian issue that has existed out there for so many years is one of the causes, one of the forces that we ignored. I think the fact that we have grown more dependent upon oil, putting a high priority on that oil, that we were really willing to risk war in order to sustain that oil supply, was something we should not have done. And thirdly, and you cannot unscramble the egg, but certainly we ought to learn from these problems, that we ought to address the distinction between the haves and the have-nots, that will never let stability rise in any area of the world. When you have $600 per capita income Egyptian soldier fighting to free up a $15,000 per capita income of a Kuwaiti, you obviously have causes of instability that gave rise to Saddam Hussein.
If Saddam Hussein is weakened or deposed, if the war is fought with very few American and Allied casualties, and peace is restored to the Middle East, will it have been worth it?
Well, again, you know, to those 150 American lives that have been lost, considering both those in action and those in accidents that have occurred since our presence out there, none of those 150 lives were worth it.
Senator Hatfield, we are not used to politicians talking like you are talking. You have a constituency in Oregon. Presumably that constituency is about 80% in favor of the war, the way Americans everywhere else are.
I would think so.
Aren't you afraid they're just going to vote you out of office next time?
No, I feel that people of Oregon are used to independent political representation. I come in a heritage of our state. I think that also people will ultimately say to a politician, I may disagree with you, but if you tell me your honest, straightforward opinion and conviction, I will respect that.
Last question. You oppose the war, but this country is in it now to a fare thee well. What would you do now?
Well, as I say, I would move as quickly as possible to achieve whatever the objective, and I hope the objective is just to drive them out of Kuwait, the Iraqi military forces. But I would also say what we can do now is begin to plan for that future. And I want to emphasize again, I support our fighting people there. I have to support them. Anybody with conscience has to support them, even though I still disagree with the policy that sent them there.
Thank you very much for joining us, Senator Hatfield. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
American casualties killed in action, wounded, missing, prisoners of war number 231 tonight. Most people would say that's not too many. Mark Hatfield says the first one was one too many. Leslie and I will be right back.
When you rinse first with Plax, normal everyday brushing takes on a whole new meaning. Plax, clinically proven to remove more plaque than brushing alone.
This is the sound of Unisom, the sound of sleep. With Unisom, you hit your pillow and fall asleep fast. Tonight, you can sleep more soundly with Unisom, America's #1 sleep aid.
When life's little irritations are everywhere you turn, more people turn to Visine. When eyes need it most, it's the most trusted name for relief. Visine gets the red out and a whole lot more. And when your eyes feel extra dry and irritated, they need extra relief. Visine Extra gets the red out, plus an extra medication that soothes, cools, and moisturizes dry, irritated eyes. Visine gets the red out and a whole lot more.
The ground war grinds on as the Allies press the battle to free Kuwait. Dan Rather reports from Saudi Arabia tomorrow on the CBS Evening News.
From the current true crime bestseller, a riveting story of modern-day piracy and murder.
Did you kill Mac or Muff Graham?
Learn the startling facts behind the crime.
She lied to us.
They've reached a verdict.
And the sea will tell. Tuesday.
America Tonight will continue.
Real confessions, real secrets revealed for you to hear.
It wasn't fair. I didn't deserve that.
Call 1-900-230-3333 to hear real confessions from real people. Plus, find out how to make your own confession.
We had a great relationship, then at a cocktail party.
Incredible secrets, untold stories, real confessions. Call 1-900-230-3333. Call now. Just $2 the first minute, $1 each additional. Adults only, please.
In this world, there are two kinds of haircuts, supercuts and other cuts. The difference is our exclusive supercuts technique. Someday, everyone will cut hair the way we do. But till then, if it isn't a supercut, good luck.
Political unrest forces Haitians to flee to Miami.
The situation for all of these people.
Channel 6's Giselle Fernandez goes to Haiti to get the story. The United States fights in Panama.
On the streets of Panama.
She travels there to get the story. And as war rages in the Persian Gulf, Giselle Fernandez flies to Israel, talks to friends and loved ones of South Florida families to get the story. Giselle Fernandez goes to the source and gets the story. Channel 6 Action News. We're earning our reputation, one story at a time.
Looking ahead to tomorrow, Barbara Bush will visit the Marine base in Quantico, Virginia, to take part in a special program for families of Marines stationed in the Gulf. In Fort Dix, New Jersey, graduation ceremonies will be held for 212 Kuwaiti nationals who took a crash military training course. After graduating, they'll join the Allied forces in the Persian Gulf. And a grim report in tomorrow's Los Angeles Times says that as much as 25% of Kuwait's civilian population may be dead, injured, or suffering from diseases like cholera or dysentery.
For months, we've been receiving almost daily messages from a brave man in Kuwait City who gets them out to us at considerable risk to himself. In October and November, he sent us descriptions of caravans of Iraqi trailer trucks looting houses, hospitals, and schools. In December, they are kidnapping and torturing boys, even children. Then they knock on the door of the house. When the parents come to the door, they shoot their son in the head and leave him dead on the doorstep. A month ago, the bombs are falling everywhere around us. These explosions are frightening, but they mean our deliverance. Last week, the oil fires are choking us. The enemy is setting Kuwait on fire. We are almost out of water and food. The killing of civilians and the torture of young people is a daily routine. Everybody sends this cry to the civilized world: SOS. Today, no electricity, no water. I cannot go out. Many places are on fire. The bombing is continuous. The sounds of all kinds of weapons are very close to us. Everybody is happy in Kuwait. Good night, Leslie.
Good night, Charles. Night, everyone.
For those of you who have been reluctant to wear a hearing aid, Miracle Ear has more great news. If you have trouble hearing in noisy situations, the exciting Miracle Ear Clarifier may be your answer. The Clarifier features a special filter that automatically reduces background noise.
In a restaurant situation, it picks up the noises I want to hear, but the other noises are just moved off into the background.
If you or someone you know thinks they may be suffering from hearing loss, call Miracle Ear at this number and receive helpful information.
It really makes a lot of difference in your way of hearing and in your way of life.
Call this number. Miracle Ear will send you a booklet on better hearing, plus a coupon for a free hearing test. Call today. Learn about all the good news from Miracle Ear.
A lot of people don't even know you got it, especially the one I got, the design that I got.
Call this number. Find out if Miracle Ear can help you.
Last night, America watched a powerful bestseller become a television event. Don't miss the startling conclusion, and the sea will tell tomorrow night.
Trapped in a real-life nightmare of multiple personalities.
It's like having amnesia, not knowing who you are.
There's only one way out, a harrowing journey through her own past. Help me! The Many Faces of Marcia, a special 48 hours, Wednesday at 10, 9 Central and Mountain.
It's the only party where you don't have to dress up.
They get to know the real me, and it's important to know what someone's really like.
It's hard to meet friendly girls. That's why I call.
You know something? It's the best party I've ever been to.
People from where you live, waiting to talk to you now. 98 cents a minute. Call now.
Weather school watch is in effect. Hi, I'm Channel 6 weather forecaster Maria Gennaro. Be on the lookout for students who suddenly have a flash of interest in weather science, whose ordinary classrooms are electrified with computer software, and whose overworked teachers get a charge out of pre-planned lessons. Observe this phenomenon firsthand at your school starting March 4th. Just write to me for a free classroom kit and watch my forecast here on Channel 6 Action News.
Maria Gennaro's Weather School. It'll take your class by storm, and it's only on Channel 6.
Wednesday night, another America Tonight National Town Meeting. Call us with your questions or comments, and you can fax us at 212-975-7596.
Later on Night Watch, thousands of Iraqi PLWs need to be fed, sheltered, and guarded. How is the overwhelming job being done? That and more on CBS News Night Watch.
This is CBS.